The unlawful and warrantless search, January 7, 2023, prompted by an unverified DCF report to assess if the children were in imminent danger. On January 7, 2023, PBSO officers, Frederick J. Merkel Jr. and S. Holst, unlawfully entered Mr. Waterman's home without a warrant and conducted a baseless, extended, and highly invasive search of his property, including a locked vehicle parked away from the residence, a locked garage, separate from the home, a locked personal safe inside the master bedroom closet. This warrantless invasion was not only illegal but was also carried out with extreme disregard for human dignity, causing irreparable humiliation, distress, and constitutional violations. Forced out of home in freezing weather for over 5 hours. At 3:30 a.m., Brandon Waterman, his paramour Samantha Warner, and their 3 children were forcibly removed from their home and left to stand outside in 43-degree weather for more than 5 hours while officers swarmed inside. Over 10 officers congregated inside and outside, prompting neighbors to come outside and watch as this public spectacle degraded and embarrassed Mr. Waterman's entire family. Coerced waiver of 4th and 5th Amendment rights under threats. After already searching the home for over 4 hours, Agents Merkel and Holst cornered both Mr. Waterman and Miss Warner and aggressively pressured them to sign a waiver of their 4th Amendment rights. They were explicitly threatened that if they refused to sign, Brandon would be immediately arrested. Their children would be taken away on the spot. They would both be charged with trafficking a Schedule I narcotic. That when the confirmed psilocybin test came back from the lab, Samantha Warner would also go down and be arrested. They also said that if we didn't cooperate with signing the waiver, then it would only make it harder on ourselves and that they would ultimately obtain a warrant no matter what we decided. At 9:00 a.m., more than 5.5 hours after the initial arrival of officers and after they had already conducted an exhaustive, unlawful search after enduring intense psychological pressure, threats of child removal, and the sheer intimidation of over 10 armed officers standing in their ransacked home, both Mr. Waterman and Miss Warner signed the waiver under duress. Biased investigation. Based on false DCF report, from the moment PBSO narcotics officers arrived, their actions demonstrated clear bias, tunnel vision, and a refusal to acknowledge evidence contradicting the false and inflammatory allegations in the DCF report. Rather than conducting an objective investigation, officers approached the scene, not to assess facts, but to build a narrative supporting the already documented falsehoods. Immediate and unfounded determination that mycology equipment was illegal. Before confirmatory lab testing, officers immediately labeled all legal mycology equipment as illegal, despite the fact that legal and illegal mushroom cultivation setups are indistinguishable by observation alone. Subsequent PBSO laboratory testing on January 18, 2023, and again on January 27, 2023, found the mushroom samples negative for any controlled substance. It is scientifically impossible to determine the legality of a mushroom growing operation without testing a mature mushroom for its specific identification type. PBSO officers, however, disregarded scientific standards and due process in favor of false assumptions and baseless accusations. Fact: the only way to confirm the presence of psilocybin in cultivated mushrooms is through laboratory analysis of a mature specimen, and PBSO's own lab tested the mushrooms on January 18, 2023, and again on January 27, 2023. Both tests were negative for any controlled substance. Agent Holst omitted these exculpatory results from her investigation and from her probable cause affidavit, despite knowing they would exonerate Brandon Waterman. Brandon Waterman's repeated attempts to correct officers' misinformation. Throughout the investigation, Mr. Waterman repeatedly expressed confusion at the hostility shown toward him and asked officers whether they had any formal knowledge of mushroom cultivation. He directly stated that mycology is a legally protected agricultural practice under Florida law and is not illegal in the presence of children, a fact PBSO ignored in favor of misrepresenting the legality of the equipment. Agricultural protections, the Florida Right to Farm Act. Mushroom cultivation falls under protected agricultural activities, especially if you were following generally accepted agricultural practices. Instead of investigating objectively, officers dismissed Mr. Waterman's statements, demonstrating a clear intent to find evidence to fit the false DCF narrative rather than seek the truth. Fundamental lack of knowledge, training and experience, and/or willful disregard of agricultural law. PBSO's officers demonstrated either a blatant ignorance of agricultural and mycology law or a willful refusal to apply factual knowledge in their handling of this case. The scientifically inaccurate statements within the police reports are not just reckless, they are malicious and legally indefensible in a court of law. There is no defense for fabricating assumptions over verifying facts, and this will be a critical issue in legal proceedings. Intentional delay and manipulation to force compliance. There was never probable cause for a warrant, so officers used intimidation tactics to force a waiver instead. By removing the family from the home for hours in freezing weather, they created a high-stress environment designed to weaken resistance and force compliance. By surrounding them with an overwhelming police presence, officers ensured that resistance felt futile. This was not an investigation. It was a blatant abuse of power, coercion, and deprivation of constitutional rights, fabrication of evidence, and false reporting to DCF. PBSO officers not only failed to conduct a proper investigation, but they actively ignored clear evidence that disproved their own narrative. The reckless misrepresentation of legal mycology equipment and the deliberate omission of the 2 negative confirmatory lab tests for the only substance they claimed to be illegal is beyond negligence. It is intentional deception. Deliberate failure to acknowledge legal mushroom cultivation. At no point did any PBSO officer, narcotics trained or not, stop to verify that mushroom cultivation is not hazardous, toxic, or illegal in the presence of children. Officers falsely labeled legitimate mycology supplies as psilocybin items, despite no visual indicators of psilocybin cultivation. PBSO lab testing on January 18, 2023, and January 27, 2023, confirming the mushrooms were negative for any controlled substance. No statutory basis to seize the materials. No observable illegal activity prompted the narcotics team's involvement. The only items of interest were 2 small containers of mushrooms inside the home. A field test allegedly yielded a positive result for psilocybin. However, PBSO's confirmatory lab testing on January 18, 2023, and again on January 27, 2023, returned negative results for any controlled substance. Despite Brandon Waterman explicitly stating that the mushrooms were oyster mushrooms, explaining their characteristics, and requesting proper testing, officers instead escalated their accusations. The Waterman family, a warrantless search exposed.